You're listening to the Immortal Icons of Dance podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Johnson. In today's episode, we'll be learning about Ann Reinking. Ann Reinking was born in 1949, and she grew up near Seattle, Washington, and trained in ballet under the former Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo dancers Marion and Ilaria Ladre and Gwen Barker. At the age of 12, Reinking made her professional stage debut as an extra in Swan Lake when the Royal Ballet toured in Seattle. For this performance, Ann got to share the stage with Dame Margot Fonteyn and Rudolf Nureyev. As a teen, she also studied at San Francisco Ballet and the Joffrey Ballet. She moved to New York City at age 18 and danced in the Corps de Ballet at Radio City Music Hall. At the age of 19, she made her Broadway debut as the Kit Kat girl Lulu in Cabaret. In 1969, she was in the ensemble for Coco, which featured choreography by Michael Bennett. In 1972, she was a part of the original Broadway cast of Pippin, which was choreographed by Bob Fosse. 2 years later, she appeared in the musical Over Here, sharing the stage with two of the Andrews sisters. Reinking then went on to star as Joan of Arc in the original cast of Good Time Charlie, a performance which earned her her first Tony nomination. In 1975, Reinking replaced Donna McKechnie as Cassie in Michael Bennett's Broadway smash hit A Chorus Line. In 1977, she stepped into the role of Roxie Hart, replacing Gwen Verdon in the original production of Chicago. In 1978, she won her first Tony Award for her role in Fosse's all-dance musical titled Dancin'. One highlight of this show is Fosse's 15-minute choreographic tour de force set to Benny Goodman's Sing, Sing, Sing. In it, Ann danced a solo to the accompaniment of the trumpet, and that choreography is affectionately known as the trumpet solo. This choreography is still being passed down by the dancers who learned it from Annie. In fact, just recently, I learned it at a Verdon Fosse Legacy Masterclass. I'm calling attention to this now because we'll be discussing the trumpet solo later in the episode. In 1986, Reinking replaced Debbie Allen in the revival of Sweet Charity, but at this time she was increasingly turning her focus towards choreography. In 1996, she won the Tony for the Best Choreography for her work on the Broadway revival of Chicago, which she directed and choreographed. This production has now surpassed 10,500 performances so far, and as of yesterday, it celebrated its 27th anniversary open on Broadway. In 1999, Reinking co-directed and choreographed Fosse, a tribute musical to Bob Fosse, for which they won the Tony for Best Musical that year. Her movie credits include All That Jazz in 1979, Annie in 1982, Movie in 1978, and the documentary Mad Hot Ballroom in 2005. But possibly the most important part of her career was the training program she founded in 1991 called the Musical Theater Project, now known as the Broadway Theater Project. With this program, Reinking took young performers under her wing and gave them the foundation they needed to thrive in theater and in life. Many performers on Broadway today were apprentices in Reinking's program, and today we'll be talking to one of them. Dylis Croman grew up in Texas and attended a performing arts high school. At the age of 14, she attended Ann Reinking's Broadway Theater Project, where she met and worked with Ann for the first time. From there, her training and teaching opportunities began to grow. At 17, she started her professional career in New York City, dancing with the Feld Ballets New York. At age 22, she made her Broadway debut in the show Fosse. She has also appeared in the Broadway shows Thou Shalt Not, Oklahoma, Sweet Charity, and the 2006 revival of A Chorus Line. She's also performed in the national tours of Chicago and Twyla Tharp's Movin' Out. Most recently, she appeared in the 2023 revival of Bob Fosse's Dancin', which received the Chita Rivera Award for Outstanding Ensemble in a Broadway show. Dylis has a long history with the 1996 revival of Chicago, and she's played Roxie on Broadway on numerous occasions. As recently as last weekend, she was back in the cell block as the Killer Corinne. Her TV credits include NBC's Smash, CBS's Guiding Light, and PBS's Great Performances Dance in America. Dylis keeps Ann's legacy alive both on stage and in the studio, where she teaches students and professionals with passion and purpose. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. All right, today on the podcast, I'm excited to introduce Dylis Croman, who's here to talk about her experiences working with the incredible Ann Reinking. Welcome.
Thank you.
So I want to start off with before you met Ann. Were you familiar with her through either seeing her on stage or in films? Did you know who she was?
I knew who she was, absolutely knew who she was, but not like, I wasn't real familiar with her as far as Fosse goes, but I knew her from Annie. Mm-hmm. I knew her from the movie Annie, mm-hmm. As Grace. So when I auditioned for her Broadway theater project program. At that time, it was called Musical Theater Project, but I auditioned for it and got in. And so, but I knew she was Grace from Annie. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that yellow dress, please. Yeah. It's just like stunning and such an icon in that movie. So I had been introduced to her by that. But when I first met her at the program and she walked into the room.
Mm-hmm. What was that first impression?
That was pretty major because she basically stops a room just by her. I think it's, obviously she's a gorgeous woman, but she had this presence that just stops everything. You go straight to her because first of all, I think she quietly demanded it, even though it wasn't something purposeful, but she just, I think it's also I think it was her ballet training. As dancers, we carry ourselves in a certain way. And when we open a door and walk into an audition or to a room for whatever it is, or we just walk into, Fairway grocery store, we pretty much, ballet gives us that sense of presence and that open shouldered and that open heart and that regalness. And she just carried that with her every day mm-hmm. without even thinking about it. But I would notice, working alongside her so much, I would notice a shift from her everyday Annie to mm-hmm. her Ann Reinking, walking into a room to work with dancers or be interviewed for something or whatever it might be. So when I first saw her, I was just like, my heart fluttered. Honestly, mm-hmm. I know it sounds kind of silly, but it did. I was like, oh my God, there she is. There's Grace from Annie. But then I knew more about her as I became, got to know her and took her classes, and I wanted to know more about who this person was. So mm-hmm. I went down the rabbit hole and saw all that jazz and all the other things on YouTube. So I was definitely blown away by her before and then even more after I met her.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about some of your early experiences learning from her?
Yeah, so I met her when I was 14, and she, again, was the artistic director of the Musical Theater Project, now called Broadway Theater Project. And I just, auditioned, got in. It was a 3-week intensive program where you dance, sing, and act from 8 o'clock in the morning till 11 p.m. So it's an all-day affair. Mm-hmm. And after the first, she taught all kinds of styles, but she really focused in on the Fosse style because that was her forte. So I took my first Fosse class from Ann Reinking, and I just was like, whoa, what is this? What is this style? I wanted to do, I didn't know I wanted to do it until I was introduced to it. But when you see something or you feel something connect to your body and your soul that works on your body and soul, mm-hmm. it was one of those aha moments. Like, I want to do this. And I did. I felt that so strongly. I want to do this style. Whatever this is, I want to do this. And so she immediately saw that in me. And
how old were you at this time?
14.
Okay.
Yeah. And so she immediately saw it, and she, I took the first week of classes, and I just remember her kind of focusing in on me. I remember, when you can feel someone when they're looking at you and stuff. Mm-hmm. So I was like, oh my gosh, I think she's noticing me. Mm-hmm. And then she, halfway through that program, that first summer that I was there, she pulled me aside and asked if I would be interested in coming back the following year to be her assistant. And it was so quick. I was just there as a student learning, and I consider myself a student even to this day, because I'm always learning and you never stop learning. But at that moment, she asked me to be her assistant, and I never assisted anybody up until that point, I was only 14. So I was still really a student through and through. And so I said, yes. I mean, immediately, what do you're not going to say no to Ann Reinking, but I didn't know what that meant at that time. When she asked me to be her assistant the following year, I had no idea that was the beginning of a long journey with her. No idea, So that's what I did. I came back the next year. I was 15. And between my freshman and sophomore year, because I was going into I was at a performing arts high school in Dallas, Texas. So in between my freshman and sophomore year, I went back and assisted Ann Reinking in her classes. And then the following year, when I was 16, she asked me to start teaching my own classes. Not Fosse yet. I wasn't quite ready for that. I wasn't polished enough to teach it yet. But like ballet and jazz, just regular classes, tap. I taught tap at the project. So it just kind of was like just a building block for her to see how I could take that in, how I could, what I looked like as a teacher, and what how I worked with her. And me as a person, as Dylis, I always I'm fiery on stage, and on and off stage, I'm pretty introverted and pretty to myself. So I've always been able to kind of give someone like here, go, you're and learn. I've always been open. My ears, heart, soul have been open to learning and absorbing. And so that's really what I did with her. And I think that's what she liked about me, is that I was an open vessel to learn. And she was, at that point in her life and career, was ready to pass it on, to teach. And she really, we learned from each other through the years,
Would she watch you teach and like give you constructive criticism afterwards? Or like, how did she teach you to teach?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. She taught me to teach mainly just by teaching herself. Like she would give, well, I remember this one specific time, and we've been working together for quite a long time at this point, but it was when I was in Paris with her, setting Chicago, the musical Chicago in Paris, on the Paris company. And I was teaching the show and getting the movement out, and I kept focusing on the details, like, because Fosse is so detailed, and I just kept going back and like drilling the details of the dance portion of it. And on a 5 or 10 minute break or whatever it was, she called me over to sit next to her, and she's always very warm about it. I mean, she could get pretty pointed when she needed to get something out of you. And she was pointed with me a couple times, but really not that much, because again, I was open to hear what she had to say. As long as you were open, she was fine with you. It's when she felt like you were closing yourself off to her, that was a threat to her. And it was like, no, I'm here to teach you. Whether you like what I'm saying or doing or not, you're in my class, so respect that, and I respected that view, because that's an old school way of, it's a very old school way of working. You respect your teacher, you respect your, your elder, even, the people that have been around longer than you, that deserves a certain amount of respect. So, but yeah, she called me over going back to Paris, and she said, so I want to see what these dancers do with the movement, and you're stifling them to actually allow their artistry to come through, because she said, you're overcorrecting. Just take a breath. I know you want it to be right. I want it to be right too, she said, but in time we will get that from them. It's just for now, she always allowed room for the dancer and the artist and the actor to really bring in themselves, so even if the step wasn't exactly the way it should be, or even it doesn't always have to be what we think it should be, I mean, even the word should is not necessarily a word I like to use, because there's room for more than, it needs to be this, it should be that. There's room. And she taught me that. That was just one example of her actually vocalizing it to me in a rehearsal, but she taught me that through the years I've been with her, that, bring yourself to it, bring your own artistry to it. Then after you have really allowed yourself to go for it. And she would say, go for broke. Like just go with everything you got, even if you fall on your face, because she would say, what's the worst that can happen? You fall on your face, you get back up and you try it again, and then, so that's what it is. It's like, yes, you want the steps to be right. And yes, you want the finger to be here, or the shoulder to be here, or the epaulement to be there, whatever it is. Yes, you want that. That's the end goal. But trying to pull perfection out of someone from the very get-go, it really does stifle their own artistry to feel free to just move and see what comes out. That's what she loved to see, is like, what's going to come out of this dancer? Like, even if it looks awkward and odd at first, through that awkwardness, there's some magic there. If someone is really committed to giving all of themselves to the movement and to the storytelling. And then it's like, if they don't give all of it, then you don't have as much to work with, So I just say, go for it. That's what I like to pass on through her. And that I've continued to, as I teach, just get it all out on the floor. And then once we get all that out, then we can hone it back and figure out. It's always easier to pull it back than it is to like reel something out of someone, like, come on, let me, show me who you are. Show me the story. Show me what you're trying to say to me. Because we only have, if we're just dancing, we only have the movement, and we only have our bodies. Our bodies are the vessel. And not to say only that's not enough, because it is enough, but it has to be informed. It has to have intention, or else it becomes flat. And so, so that's, it's a layered thing, but she really did teach me to bring myself to whatever I was dancing or saying through my body. And there's a certain amount of freedom in that, to really just own yourself. I mean, she used to always say too, if you don't believe in yourself, who will? I remember her saying that one time to me, because I have imposter syndrome, like we all do sometimes in different stages of my life. But you have to believe in yourself, because nobody else is going to do it for you. So she really believed in that. And Ann Reinking had just as much of imposter syndrome than any of us. I mean, she really did. That's why she enjoyed having, someone next to her to help, teach and to help pass it down, because she felt supported. And it had to be the right person. So, that would also give her the reins and be open to her process. But if she let you in, you felt so much support by her, and she felt so much support by you. Like, it was just such a partnership that you could learn from and grow from and have fun in and laugh and be silly. She really created a safe environment if you allowed her to do that for you. She was an incredible woman inside and out, and off stage and on, so to speak, inside of the classroom and outside of the classroom. She was quite a queen in every way.
So you made your Broadway debut in Fosse, I believe. Is that correct? Yes. Could you explain anything about Ann's involvement in that show? And,
Yeah, I came in later. I wasn't in the original cast, so I was a replacement. Elizabeth Parkinson left to go do Moving Out, and they brought me in to take that track, and I was on the road doing Fosse. So I opened the national tour of Fosse. There was a really cool through line that happened when I joined the Fosse tour. Annie asked me to help her set the tour, because I was also the dance captain of the tour. And so she asked me to learn. I think my assignment, I had 6 numbers in the show. Shoeless Joe from Hannah Momo, I know, was one, because she actually hired me to come to Toronto, where the original cast of Fosse was rehearsing, to help me to help her set that number. So I walked into a room in Toronto, into a studio with legends like, Marianne Lamb and Scott Wise, Elizabeth Parkinson was there, Jane Lanier, all these people. And I was like, Oh my God. And I was very young. I was 19.
Wow.
Yeah. So I walked in and I was like, okay, so I'm going to teach them this number. I can't believe I'm actually here. But when you're that young, I do feel like, I wish we could carry that into our more mature years, and we can, but it's just for some reason, after you live more life, you start to be more fearful of things. But there's a way of batting that back. I mean, you just have to keep pushing forward, right? But at that age, I was just so young and fearless. And I walked in with confidence, just like Annie walked into the room when I first saw her and I first laid eyes on her. I knew I had to walk in and show some amount of confidence, even if I didn't feel it.
Yeah.
And that's a good trick. It's a good way of doing anything in your life that you're scared to do, is just without having like overly confident, like without having ego involved. There's a healthy amount of confidence that you have to show that, I can do this. Even if in the back of your mind, you're like, oh my God, I'm scared. Because I'm scared all the time. It doesn't matter what it is. I'm always scared. I'm always nervous, but it's like a light switch. When you walk in and you start to do what you love to do, it just turns on. You turn on and you go, and then you're off to the races, so to speak. So, but yeah, I started with my Fosse journey. I set Shoeless Joe when I was 19, and then I guess it was maybe like 8 to 9 months later, they were putting the tour up, and then she said, you're going to be the trumpet solo track, and you're also going to be the dance captain, but I would like for you to help me set some of the show. So I went to the Broadhurst Theater, notated like a standing room. I put my little book on the little banquette and just wrote like in the dark, trying to write everything. And then I get home and be like, what does that say? I have no idea. But I learned it from watching it. And obviously a lot of research, a lot of YouTube Googling and all that. But, and then I would set the framework, and then she would come in and totally mess with it and make it right, but so I started helping her. Even that was my first experience of going into Fosse. And then, as I said, they brought me into the Broadway company, and that ended up being my Broadway debut.
If you like the work that is being done here at Immortal Icons of Dance, there are many ways you can support. Most simply, you can follow us on Instagram at Immortal Icons of Dance. It would also be great if you could rate the podcast on whatever platform you listen. 5 stars are always appreciated. Okay. So. Everyone wants to hear you talk about trumpet solo. It's gone viral a couple times the last few months. Everyone loves watching that clip. Talk about it for those who aren't lucky enough to get to take class and hear about it in person from you. Yeah. Well, I mean, it was a dream. It was a dream solo to do. It encapsulated all of me as a dancer, as a person, because it had the subtlety and the style of what I think is my forte, which is the stylistic part of it. But I also could use my technique and my fiery. I'm a Leo, so I'm kind of fiery. I'm an introvert. I'm an introvert, but I'm also very fiery when I get fiery. So I'm like Beyonce. When I step on the stage, I'm a new person. I'm another person. But so I got to use my Sasha Fierce in that solo. I could really be that other side of myself. That solo is so special because it's not just dancing. It's not just about 8 counts and the steps. It's about abandonment and freedom and sensuality and elegance and fiery panther-like energy that you can tap into all those sides of yourself in that solo. And, I mean, it's so iconic because Ann Reinking created it, and so many wonderful, incredible dancers have done it since her. But we are all able to put our own stamp on it, that solo kind of opens itself up to be whatever you want it to be, really, in a framework, of course. But I mean,
it's one of those things. When I first saw the PBS show, they invited us, the company of Fosse, to go look at the final product of Fosse on PBS. And so we went to the Channel 13 studios and sat down in a movie theater and watched it. And I was so excited. We were all so excited to see the show on film, and it was an incredible experience. But, a dancer watching themselves is always like, I want to coil into myself. Like, I'm not here. Mm-hmm. But I watched it and I was happy with most of it. But really, some of it, I thought my leg was higher, or I thought my back was more laid out, all those little silly things. Mm-hmm. So of course I picked it apart when I first saw it. But now, in this day, when I'm getting people coming up to me and saying how inspired they were by it, and I've had so many people say different things, but one person had said that it really saved his life. Not necessarily the trumpet solo itself, mm-hmm. but just it inspired that solo for him inspired him so much that he continued to dance when he was about to put dance in the trash, mm-hmm. like he was going to leave it. And so just to me, for me, the trumpet solo, I know it's iconic in its way, and it's everybody's like, yeah, it's work, all that has all that around it too. But for me personally, what the trumpet solo is it's a gift, not only for me that I got to do it, and it just happened to be filmed, which was something I can show my family, for years to come, and share with people in my life. That's a really special gem to have. But for me, it's more than that. It's bigger than that. It's the people that it's inspired. Not just the trumpet solo, but the whole thing, mm-hmm. that whole filming of Fosse. All of us that were part of that, we felt like we really were a part of something special, and we were. And it changed a lot of people's trajectory in life, and it's inspired a lot of people. So I'm just, beyond honored to have been that person, mm-hmm. Because I was inspired by so many people. I mean, not only Ann Reinking, but Gwen Verdon, and Lucille Ball is one of my favorites when it comes to comedy and mm-hmm. physical comedy. Baryshnikov, it goes on and on and on. But the dancers that I watched growing up, and that in my formative years that I was just focused in on and learning from everything they did, mm-hmm. to be that for someone else it's such an honor so it's definitely something that I never knew when they were recording it and I was doing it. I didn't realize what it was going to become. But at the time I was doing it, I did realize that I'm one lucky girl. Yeah.
So that was, I believe, the first time really that you got to step into one of Annie's roles, but you've gotten to do it multiple times. You've done Cassie in A Chorus Line. I know that she didn't originate it, but it was a role that she had done previously. Charity and Sweet Charity, and then Roxie in Chicago. Mm-hmm. Did she ever help you prepare for any of these roles? Did you ever speak with her about them?
Yeah, Chorus Line, I didn't talk to her about that, because at that time she had moved to Phoenix, and we kind of had a few years where we didn't stay in touch. Mm-hmm. So I unfortunately didn't get to talk to her about Chorus Line, but the main one that I feel like I pulled a lot from, and she worked with me a lot with, it was Roxie in Chicago. Mm-hmm. I remember one time I went to visit her in Phoenix, where she was living at that time, and we pushed everything aside, in the living room, and I did the Roxie monologue for her, and it was nerve-wracking, because I was like, that monologue just in general is hard to do unless you're on a stage and everything else is black, because it's 7 minutes of you just talking. Mm-hmm. And so it's always a little uncomfortable. But I made myself do it, in front of her. And she helped me pick apart those little moments and the dynamic changes. And we just talked about her as a woman who Roxie is, and she also helped me form that 7-minute monologue into more of a dance. Because I remember her sharing with me, she actually said, I didn't do it this way, but I feel like you have more of a Gwen Verdon quality within your movement that would lend yourself to maybe take from what she did. And so she really showed me some little things that Gwen would do. And she was, and again, you know, she allowed me to come through with Gwen quality, but through my own quality. So the combination of the two. And it changed the way I did that whole monologue just from that one session with her. Yeah, she did. She helped me with that. And of course I learned the trumpet solo from Ann Reinking. So that was definitely from her. Mm-hmm. And you know, when you run and jump on the bandstand, that part I was so nervous because I've never been like, an athletic dancer. I've always been more, like, in other words, like I don't do tricks and aerials mm-hmm. and back handsprings. Gymnastics and that kind of thing I've always been nervous to like go backwards. Yeah. So this jump and like flying onto the bandstand and that whole Panther section, I was nervous. I was like, oh my God, I've got to learn how to do this and get over my fear. And she just said, you know, tomorrow bring your knee pads. So I did. And she said, put your knee pads on and just go run and go jump on it. Go, go, go. 5, 6, 7, 8, run. Mm-hmm. And she's like, you have knee pads. You're not going to hurt yourself. You're protected. And ultimately we're going to need to take these off. But for now, I want you to just go and just fly onto the bandstand, see what happens. And after I did that first time, I was like, okay, I did it. And then the more I did it, I just got more comfortable, obviously. But yeah, just sometimes just like ripping off the Band-Aid of anything you're fearful of. But yeah, she the first time I did it, she was like, see, it wasn't that bad. I was like, you're right, it wasn't bad. Oh, I'm so glad that's over. But then I figured out a way, you know, she told me, she's like, the side of she said, I'll have this little callus. And she showed it to me. She's like, this is always going to be there for the rest of my life because it was from landing on it 8 times a week. But it was on the side of my knee, you know, and on her knee. And so you just kind of got used to it. But yeah, I would say Roxie and the trumpet solo are the 2 main ones that I really got like hands-on information from her and inspiration just in a studio setting, you know. Charity, that was also not original choreography. The one I did, it was Wayne Salento in the style of Bob Fosse. But so yeah. You know.
Okay, I know I say this every week, but I really mean it this time. I want you to go and click on the show notes for this episode. Go click on that description and check out the links that I have there. I really want you to click the link that says reference footage and check out, I've got a whole YouTube playlist with tons of awesome footage that's available for everyone to see. You're gonna see Ann Reinking performing in the 1996 revival of Chicago while it was still at City Center before it even transferred to Broadway. You can also see footage of Dylis playing Roxie on Broadway. There's interviews with Ann when she was younger and later in her career. There's also a really beautiful tribute video that was created after her passing in 2020. I hope today's conversation with Dylis inspires you to dig a little bit deeper and learn some more about Ann Reinking. Happy hunting! So I was in your class last week at Steps, and you bring up Annie a couple of times in corrections or, you know, explaining just sort of purpose and drive for dancers. What are some ways, you've already spoken about sort of like your philosophy of performing and learning and how you've, you know, accumulated some of that from Annie, but what are some like specific, like concrete corrections that you go like, oh yeah, Annie used to say this all the time, so I'm gonna, you know, like the eyes you mentioned.
Yeah, I was talking about her. Yeah, she would talk about how your eyes need to be focused when you dance, because a lot of times we think that it ends, we think it ends here. Well, it actually ends there, right? Same with the eyes. It's, if nothing's going on here, then we're not reading it. So she would talk about burning a hole through the back of the house with your eyes. And she was the queen of that. She was like, her eyes were piercing on stage. They were so beautiful. But like, what other she would, this is not like specific, but it is an essence that she would talk about a lot, which is not, specifically with the Fosse style, it can become it's a very sexy style. I mean, it's quirky. It's all kinds of different adjectives, but one of them is sexy. And she always liked to say, it's not necessarily sexy more than it's sensual. And I liked that because it just puts a whole different spin on it. It's not, you're not trying to grind our way into this sex appeal. It's more of and she would use the word elegance. It's elegant. It's not raunchy, And so that was one thing she always focused on, was the elegance of the style and the sensuality of it, which is, I think exactly, it's spot on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did she ever teach you anything about rejection? Like, would you ever go to her after an audition? Or, you're also talking about how she also had imposter syndrome, just like some of her struggles and that are just universal to performers in this business. What did she teach you about that?
Yeah. She really, she never sugarcoated anything. I mean, she would say pal. She called me pal. she said, pal, it's hard. It's hard. There's no other way to cut it, to say it. It's just the rejection part of this business is the hardest part of it, because we are such sensitive beings anyway to even do what we do, so she would explain to me, it's normal. It's normal to be this scared. It's normal to be this sad or, whatever about something maybe I didn't get, well, she's the first person I called, actually. And then our relationship was very, very new, but I had moved to New York City when I was 17, and I was in a ballet company, a contemporary ballet company called Feld Ballet, but Elliot Feld, who also played Baby John in the West Side Story movie. He was the artistic director, or it was his company, Elliot Feld's company. And so I had moved to New York to dance with him, and I had gotten let go amongst like 7 other dancers, because he was doing a shift in his company, and he had to, wasn't like he didn't like us. It's just that he was making a shift and building a company with just the people that he trained. And he trained under a school called the New School. And so all the dancers that came up from his training, he wanted to make the company strictly those people, those dancers. So that meant that me and 7 other dancers were let go. And I was devastated, because I thought, I literally thought my career's over. It's just crazy how dramatic you get about it. You're like, oh my God, it's all over. I quit. I'm going to throw in the towel. But I was so devastated, because I'd moved here for that. And actually my mom suggested it. She said, well, I don't know if you feel comfortable doing this, but maybe call Ann Reinking and see what she might have to say, to say to you and help you through this. And so I did. And it was her, she obviously had sympathy for it and let me cry and let me get it out. And she said, it's normal. This is okay. She said, your life is not over. Your career is not over. I promise you that. She said, but what I would like to ask you is, would you like to come to an audition that I'm holding? And I said, yes, when is it? And she said, well, it's in a week, so you don't have much time, but you're going to need to get a song together. And I'd never sung in an audition before. So I took her up on it. It was called Applause. And it was an out of town show that we were hoping to bring to New York, but it never made it. But she was choreographing it. And so I went into the audition, and obviously had worked, she gave me a number of a vocal coach to go see. So I did, and learned a song real quick and went in and sang terrible. I was so nervous. My nerves got in the way and my voice was shaky, but I ended up getting a call back miraculously. And I went in and I worked hard in between the original call and the callback, and got my nerves out, sang it in front of a couple friends, get it out, and just kept singing and singing and singing it, at home. And then I finally, and so I got hired for that show. But my point is that she would allow you to feel your feelings, but then it was basically like, get back up there, come to this audition, like just stay moving forward. Don't think about why they didn't hire me, why, that was really her focus, was to keep going. You can't dwell in the past. It's not, and I always say, and maybe I got it from her, I'm not sure, but I always say, if it's so black and white, if you don't get something, then the only reason you didn't get it is because it wasn't meant for you. Whether you, yes, it's good to have like constructive criticism if you can get feedback from your agent or from the casting office of what maybe you could do more of or less of or whatever. That's also great. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, take a little bit of that, absorb it, but then also just throw away whatever you didn't get and move forward. Just move to the next thing, because the more we dwell on things we don't get, the less chance we have to be completely open for the next thing that's just waiting right around the corner for you. So, and I think about that all the time in the trajectory of my career and the things that I didn't get. And then I look back years later and like, oh my God, I didn't get that because I was supposed to do this, which changed my life or whatever it was, mm-hmm. And you can't always see why, but sometimes you can. And it's all meant to be the way it is. And so she really believed that. She really believed just getting back up on the horse and just keep moving forward, mm-hmm. And it's easier said than done. And I think, I know for her, when she moved to Phoenix and stuff, that was a hard transition for her, because even though that's what she wanted and she made the choice with good intentions and it was the best thing for her, and she was happy there, but that transition was hard for her, because she was used to being in New York and thriving and being in show after show after show and movies, and and it just that was a time in her life where she was getting a little older and maturing a little bit more, and just had decided it's best to kind of get out of the city, which is something I did as well for myself. I moved to Nashville for a few years, and that was helpful for me. I needed a break from the city, and I gave myself that. I gave myself permission to walk away for a second, and got my yoga certification. And I kept moving forward, but in a different way. Yeah. And I was I was on the road with doing Roxie at that point, but there was a couple of years there where I wasn't working. So whatever you're doing, whether you're moving forward in a show or you're moving forward in this business that we're talking about now, it's not always necessarily important that we're moving forward in that. As long as, if you want to stay with it, then find other things that interest you, Mm-hmm. That's also something very, something she taught as well, like have other interests. Don't pigeonhole yourself into just one thing, because that thing sometimes doesn't work out all the time, and it might have a dry spell or whatever it is. But if you have something else, like she loved horses, she liked to ride horses. That wasn't my path, because I get a little nervous sometimes. I'm starting to get more comfortable with horses, but right now, I didn't grow up with them. So, but she did, and that was her pastime. She loved riding horses and, learning new techniques of riding. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of her thing for me. I love my yoga, and I like to write. I'm kind of in a dry spell of writing right now, but I'm going to get back to it. Actually, I've decided. But just finding other things that bring joy to you is because it feeds your art anyway. You go back to what you really want to do in life. And once that dry spell is over, which it will come to an end, but sometimes it feels long and drawn out. But it is the part of this business that is the hardest, and we're never alone. We all go through it. But there was one time specifically with Annie, I went to her because I was very, very, I was doing Roxie on Broadway. I was having these moments of like on stage where I felt like everything was closing in, and then it would go away. But like this really and I was like, what is happening to me? It was really kind of scary, And so I had learned some tricks, like someone told me about like passing, like those little therapy balls that you use to lay on your back and release your back muscles and stuff. But I would like toss the ball like this, and you just keep your eye on the ball and you toss it, and it does something neurologically to your brain, and it sends the waves to kind of bring your nervous system down. And there's some breathing exercises that I've taken from my yoga practice and stuff, but it was like nothing was working. I was like, why am I having these moments? And so I called her, and this is before she moved. And I called her, and actually, no, she was living in Phoenix at that time. She was in town visiting. That's what it was. And I called her. I said, do you have time while you're here to meet for coffee? And so we met at Dean and DeLuca And I sat down and I like immediately started crying. And she was like, I could tell while we were in line waiting for our sandwiches and stuff, she's like, I could tell something was not, that something was off. So talk to me. And I said, I'm having these really nervous. And I told her what I was experiencing. And she said, so you feel like that, that people are going to find you out, that they're going to find you out. And I said, find me out? What do you mean? She goes, well, they're going to find out that you have no idea what you're doing. And, how did this person even get here? And I was like, yeah, that's exactly. She was, it just was in her own way with her beautiful piercing blue eyes and her little smirk, like that little wink kind of look on her face. That was like, she understood, she was like, that's normal. That's okay. And I said, but how do I get past having these episodes on stage? She said, you just have imagine whatever you'd like to imagine in the audience, but mainly just allow yourself the understanding that you are here for a reason. These people out here that are watching you are rooting for you. They want you to be good. They want you to give them a great show. And each show that you do is going to be different. You don't have to match yourself, lift yourself up to a place that you can't. In other words, I guess I'm kind of fumbling what I'm trying to say here, but basically not trying to outdo yourself every time. And I think that's kind of something we go through, or at least I go through. And I think I've talked about this with some friends too. It's we think we have to match what we've done before, and we have to get better, and we want to do that, but also sitting back and allowing ourselves to be like, you know what, I'm meant to be here, I'm good enough to be here, I wouldn't have gotten hired if I wasn't, and just trusting that. And we're our biggest critics, and our biggest, we get in our own way sometimes. And I think at that point in my life, I was getting in my own way, and I still have moments of that, but I was able to know that it's normal. Mm-hmm. It's normal to feel like that, I shouldn't be up there, and that people are like, what is she doing up there? Judging me from the audience, who just allow that to fizzle out and trust that you're right where you're supposed to be. And if you're not meant to be there, then you won't be there. Then you won't be hired to be there, So it's just really that simple. But she was always just able to kind of use humor to kind of shake you back into reality of what it actually really is. So yeah, she was very supportive in that way.
What was the highest compliment she ever paid you?
Yeah, I would say the highest. So I remember someone talking to her. I don't know if it was in an interview situation. I can't remember, but she said she was asked why she chose me as someone to take under her wing. And she said, Dylis is a hard worker, first of all. So I noticed that in her immediately, that she was working hard to get what I wanted out of her and what she wanted out of herself. She had high expectations of herself, which always makes for someone to do well. And she said, and I noticed that she was talented and she had what it took and the potential to do what this business needs. But I guess the other third part of that assessment that she gave me was, it was the third part that I held most close to my heart, which was, and she's a kind person. And I remember when she said that, I got, and I feel a little bit right now just of emotion around it, because we try our best to be kind and continue to be patient and continue to be open in this business. And as much as we get rejected, sometimes we want to close off and not be kind because our ego gets in the way, or we get hurt. When you get hurt and stampled on, you act out sometimes. And so the fact that she noticed in me my talent, my hard work, but the third thing that she noticed was that I was a kind human being, was such a huge compliment from that I took, and I still to this day hold really close, because that's what I thought of her.
Mm-hmm.
So for her to say that she thought the same thing about me was just such an honor to hear it coming from her. Because she was exactly that. She was all the wonderful things that we know of her, but as a person, she was kind. She was generous, loving, nurturing. She gave people benefit of the doubt, because she knew what it was like. And so she allowed that space for people to be imperfect and then come back and start over, start again, push reset.
Mm-hmm.
She was had amazing quality that way. The reset button was always our friend, so you felt like you could really be imperfect and it was okay. But but the flip side of that is, if you didn't push reset, or you didn't rehearse in your living room, the night before coming back to the rehearsal space, and she could see you haven't worked on it, then that's when she would get upset. Because people, just like all the greats, you hear like, oh, they get upset with their dancers, or they can be pointed. And yeah, she could be pointed sometimes. There's no, people that have worked with her know this. But there was always a reason for it. There was a reason, because she knew your potential, and she knew you could get it. She could get it out of you. But if you weren't meeting her halfway, that's when she would get upset.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, she was a kind, generous, loving, unbelievably open soul that made everybody's life brighter when she was around.
Mm-hmm. I can hardly believe that the holiday season is already upon us, and Immortal Icons of Dance has gifts for lovers of dance and dance history. To see our selection, head to shop.immortaliconsofdance.com. There, you'll find illustrations of some of our favorite dancers on shirts and sweatshirts and Christmas ornaments. There's also a collection of rare and vintage dance books and ballet programs. The one item that I'm most proud of is the wooden ornament celebrating the upcoming 90th anniversary of Balanchine's Serenade. It was designed, painted, and assembled by my hands in my uncle's garage this summer. There were only 50 made, so it's a very limited edition. Hopefully you can snag yours before we're sold out. To get ahead on your Christmas shopping, head to shop.immortaliconsofdance.com. If someone has never seen Ann Reinking dancing before, what would be the top 3 YouTube videos you recommend they check out?
Oh,
what are your favorites?
Well, one of my top favorites, my top favorite is of her doing it's Big Noise. So, but it's not the original choreography.
I know what you're
talking about. Yeah. And it's a duet with another guy, and I don't know. I should know. She's told me his name before, and I'm not going to come up with it right now. So I'm sorry, whoever that is. But this duet is unbelievable. It's Fosse choreography, but it's not the original from dancing. So to me, that's just, I get mesmerized every time I watch it, because she's moving so quick. It's so quick and so stylized, and it's very difficult. But she makes it look so effortless. The other thing, I love her charity. There's clips of her playing charity, and it's just her vulnerability in that role is heartbreaking and heart-wrenching and lovable and vulnerable and everything. It's amazing. I would say, gosh, what's the third one I love? I'll just go like full circle it. Honestly, I love watching her dance in the yellow dress from Annie.
Yeah.
I just think that's because she's exuding herself in that. Her face is just so beautiful, and her smile. The intention of the piece is, the excitement of getting Annie, this, and that's who she was. She got excited about nurturing the young, the youth. And that ended up being one of her triumphs in life, was to mentor thousands and thousands of dancers and artists not just dancers, even singers. Like this project that she was the artistic director of, we did it all. And it was unbelievable to watch her mentor just anybody and everybody. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be like a technical dancer for her to like you. She liked actors who couldn't dance at all. She liked, you know what I mean? She mentored all different types of artists, and she mentored them very well and with lots of generosity and there's a documentary that is talking about YouTubing things and watching things. It's called "The Joy is in the Work." And that's a quote that she would always say, "The joy is in the work," because she loved studio time. She loved to be in the studio. That's where she really shined, and where she just liked the creative process and to see what everybody brought. So for me, watching Annie play Grace in the movie Annie was that she was exuding like that excitement to help this young girl out.
Yeah.
And then danced gorgeously through it and sang. And it's just such a bright moment, I think, in that yellow dress. She's beautiful. So those three, I guess.
Yeah.
I'd say there's so many, but
I know.
Yeah.
You could fall down a rabbit hole for hours. I definitely have.
Yeah.
So she's left quite a legacy. What did it mean to you to speak at her memorial this year at the Ambassador Theater? I was there, and it was a very powerful afternoon to be there. It was
a powerful afternoon. Yeah, it really was. And it was having it in the Ambassador Theater where Chicago plays and stuff. It was very powerful. For me personally, I had just opened dancing the night before.
Oh my gosh, you're right.
Yeah. So I woke up, I'd already had my speech written out, what I was going to say at her memorial. But it was such a mixed bag of emotions, those 2 days. Because I remember thinking, I can't believe the memorial's the day after we opened, like just so much in one 48-hour period.
Yeah.
But the opening night of dancing was so magical and everything, and I could feel her there, and I wore one of her blouses for the opening. So she was with me through the whole thing. And then I woke up in the morning of the memorial, and I was so, like every time, like anything I ever do, I was so nervous, and I was so like all those things that feel like this. But then it was so strange because on the flip side of that, just as equally as I was feeling that, I was feeling a sense of calm. And it was, I don't think I've ever felt something so opposite at the same time. So that's how I woke up. And I just, I remember putting some music on. I just took some, meditated in the morning and tried to connect to her a little closer, and lit a candle and just really took my morning to really just ease into the day. And then I was prepared. I had prepared something because I didn't want to be up there fumbling over my words. And I'm not good. I'm fumbling all over. I always do. I always fumble because I like to have a little structure. But when I stepped up to the podium to talk about her and read from I just was like, I'm reading from the page. I'm not going to even act like I'm going to present this. I just want to read it from my heart. And I felt her there. And then her family was there, her husband and Liz Foldy, who was in All That Jazz with her. She was the 12th. She played Bob Fosse's daughter in the movie. So the staircase dance, Everything Old is New Again. Liz is now grown up, but she was there with her best friend Barbara, and so it was like all her family from Phoenix, and so many. It was just such a magical day to feel everyone that gathered for her and to celebrate her legacy like we did, because it'd been a couple of years and we were waiting for that, to give her that and to come together and support one another in that way. And it was a very magical day, and just much needed for everyone's hearts to honor her and to feel like we were all there for her, because she was there for so many of us for years and years. I mean, there's so many people that could literally say the same story that I have of the fact that she was there for them and, nurtured them along many paths, and also had so many laughs. And she was a goofy, funny, her laugh. What I miss the most of Ann Reinking is her laugh, really and truly, because there was no other laugh like it. When she laughed from her gut, and that brassy like voice of hers. And she was like a little school kid, like wanting, getting in trouble. Like she would, be over there, like, behind her hand. So many times where I see her like this, like, and her shoulders moving, because she can't stop laughing in intimate spaces where you're like, we can't, it's an audition, you can't. But she'd have to like step out of the room to pull herself together. She just got tickled a lot. Mm-hmm. And that part of her, I really, really miss, because it was infectious. She would definitely bring you along for her journey, her twisted, crazy, funny journey. But yeah, it was a beautiful day to honor her and to celebrate her. And I was so graciously honored to get to be the one that gets to speak on her as a mentor, because again, like I said, there's thousands of dancers and artists that were mentored by her. Mm-hmm. So that was the thing I was most nervous about, is I wanted to make sure I was representing everyone that felt the way I felt and that was mentored by her, because that's, I didn't want it to come across that it was about me speaking of her. I wanted it to feel like I'm speaking for the whole community. Yeah. And so I think I did that. I hope I did that. And it was a beautiful day nonetheless. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing so much of Annie with us today.
Yes, of course, Lauren. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. Join us here next week, where we'll be talking to Jacqueline Puglisi about her experience working with Martha Graham. See you then. The Immortal Icons of Dance podcast is written, produced, and edited by me, Lauren Johnson. Our music is written by Shelby Rassler of Jenkins & Rassler.